I think I just realized that my audio is off. So let me try that again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. My name is Mike D'Angelo, aka That Tellest Guy. Today we are talking Tellest once more. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about the Tales of Tellest. We talked about it a little bit as we were going through some of our older content. Tales of Tellest is a collection, an anthology of short stories and larger novellas that we had together at one point. We talked about like the bigger novellas. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the short stories. So I'm going to try and see if we can kind of poke around and see stuff in the art gallery that kind of throws things together in a nice way. So we'll look at things piece by piece. Certainly feel free to kind of stop me and we'll chat along the way and things of that nature, but we'll just jump right in. So the first story that we're going to talk about is actually, we're going to go in alphabetical order, I think. So we'll talk about A Most Unusual Patriot. So in A Most Unusual Patriot, we see a character who was the first non-Mike D'Angelo character built, I think, in their own short story. And what I mean by that is it was a story that was written not by me. Now, Rihanna certainly put her own spin on things, but typically it was a kind of collaborative effort when she and I were working together. A Most Unusual Patriot was a situation where our buddy Aaron Canton, who has done quite a number of our stories at this point, lent one of his characters. Well, it's a Tellest character, but he created her for Tellest. And put something together for us. He used a lot of the content that already existed in the world. So he used Adelatha and the Westwick Thieves Guild and everything like that, and built something out of that. So he introduced JD Rivers to our world. We've had a couple of awesome pieces of art that we've had done for JD Rivers. I need to find a better way to look at all these awesome pictures of these characters a little quicker, but we've got this one from Barnswallow, we've got this one from June Jensen, and then we've had a lot of others across the way. Let me see if I can find the one that Hosier did real quick. Just poking around. So in A Most Unusual Patriot, we get to see this character who is I hear my dog yapping outside. We get to see this character who's a thief with a little bit more of a kind of quirky, whimsical feel to it, instead of the murder kill kind of thieves and rogues that we've seen in a lot of fantasy and even within the Tellest universe up until that point. She's definitely got her own way of doing things. She's got some familiarity to other characters that we have in the universe, because we do have a couple of other like druid ranger types who can manipulate plant life and things like that. She kind of coerces plants to do her bidding, which is a nice thing. It definitely kind of throws things in a different way. Like, she has to basically like ask, "Hey, can you help me in this situation?" And she spawned a couple of sequels. With Tales of Tellest 2, we have two more A Most Unusual stories that Aaron brought into the fold, and we expect to see much more from her in the future as well. After that, we're going to be taking a look at Becoming a Man. Becoming a Man is the first story that our editor, Nace Flaw, put together for us, and it was the first short story that we had, I believe, that had its own book cover. So Paul Davies put this together for us. Very cute little idea. The idea is just a young boy who's being put to task and looking for a crazy monster in the sewers, and the monster is not quite what he thinks. So it's about perspective and a lot of cool things like that, and Paul brought Nace's idea together in a very interesting way. This was right at the beginning of our shift to kind of like the non-in-house, and by that I mean non-me artwork that we had and everything. I'm oddly proud of the way that I had originally done some of our artwork, but it really needed a fresh coat of paint, and Paul kept in the style that we were expecting with Becoming a Man. It's a little bit modern, and we haven't really gone in that route too much since, but we definitely had a fun time playing with that. I will not sing or look that up on screen, but what I will say, Sean, is that when I saw you say what makes a man, I thought, what is a man? A miserable pile of secrets. So we've got blessings and curses next. Blessings and curses is another one where we've got some characters that came of that we got to explore in some fun ways. Let me see if I can find some other pictures of Conrad. I know that I have a couple more of him. And Conrad actually became a Quantum Quest character as well. He's one of the ones that we have in the reinforcements set that's coming out soon. The whole concept of blessings and curses is we wanted to take something from... it's kind of like a precursor to wild magic in a way, because it helps to set the stage for what ends up being kind of like our Pacific Island area of the Tellest universe. We have something called Kaikano's Revenge that affects one of the characters that we introduce in Blessings and Curses, and it basically means that he's just got, some evil god-infused power that he can't control, but he controls it as best he can. And then you have Conrad the Blessed, who comes around and screws things up by stealing those powers in a kind of weird way. And Conrad is by nature, a healer. He's someone who's looking out to try and help people. But I wanted to see kind of what happens when you force a healer, a cleric, someone like that, who says, basically it is a Cthulhu kind of thing. It's got like that kind of eldritch horror kind of feel to it. And Kaikano's Revenge, when it afflicts Conrad, it's a situation where he can try and keep it in as much as he can, but he basically has, like this eldritch blast kind of feeling that emanates out from him and causes big problems for the people that he interacts with. Now, that's not to say that he can't just turn around right afterwards and do a little bit of healing, but every time he heals someone, that shadow power inside him keeps growing, and it eventually needs to get discharged again. So it's kind of it's a weird way of looking at a healer, and it's a fun way of doing it, especially for a character who just wants to do good, and in this case really can't as much as they want to. So we'll move over to Dream No More. I think Dream No More is going to be kind of tricky to visualize because we don't have any pictures of the knight in question, but we do have pictures of his daughter here and there. Let me see if I've got any more of Zoe. I think it's just the two of them. We might have another one from Hosier. Let's see. No, I got a couple more, actually. That's Dirk. All right, so we'll look at a couple pictures of Zoe. Zoe is Randall Hart's daughter. So in Dream No More, we're looking at a character who's been recently wounded. He's taken a fall that could have possibly killed him, and he's in this medieval setting, hanging on as best he can, and in these pretty close, sorry, Dougie's are yapping downstairs. As close as he is to death, he kind of sees this near-death experience version of his wife, who... All right, so I'm going to go into a little bit of a weird preachiness right here. So Rihanna and I have joked about the idea of a religion called tutorialism, where the idea is that like this plane of existence that we're on is just a playground that we're in that allows us to learn certain things. We're still supposed to do the best we can with what we've learned and how we treat people and things like that. But the idea is that this is like level 1, and we get this opportunity to learn some basic concepts about how to create our own sandbox, so to speak. And then when Randall ends up in this near-death experience, he ends up going to level 2, we'll say. And his wife is basically telling him, like, hey, if you can imagine something, you can do it here. But the problem is, like, you don't have the tools to imagine a lot of these things in your regular plane of existence. So we kind of open up your mind a little bit and things like that. And he's got this sort of, he's happy to be reunited with his wife and happy with these new tools that he has, knowing what world he's going to go back to. But then he's got his children who are waiting behind for him. And it's just an interesting way of, it was a cool way for me to explore the possibility of an afterlife in a way that we don't usually see it. And kind of like the philosophical turmoil that someone might have, knowing that there is something that exists, that it's close enough that you can reach out and grab it, but knowing that it's not your time, and knowing that you kind of have to, in some ways, suffer for that gift. So I don't know. It was fun. And then his children, Zoe and Garrett, are kind of secondary characters in the story because a lot of his story takes place with him in this kind of fugue state. Zoe has been like one of our street level characters that really hasn't had enough of a chance to shine, just because we've been spending a lot of time with the other characters in the Tellest universe. She really needs her own story at this point, so maybe in Tales of Tellest Volume 3 we'll put together something that's specific for her, because she's an interesting character. She we don't have too much of the stuff that happens like in the shadows of Adelatha. We don't have like a Batman-esque character who looks out for the little person during those times, because we're usually dealing with more personal issues for each of our characters, or a growing situation where bigger and worse things happen. So it would be fun to spend a little bit of time with Zoe. Give me 1 second, I have to hydrate. Are you saying she looks like Jessica Rabbit? All right, we're going to talk about Fallen. Fallen is a very short story. It was actually at one point the first short story that I was writing, and I think I wrote it for a writing contest that I saw on the Fantasy Writing Prompts subreddit, and it really doesn't fit too much to the model of what we expect from the Tellest universe. It was just kind of something that ended up in the Tellest universe, and I think at some point I'd really like to expand on it, because it was a very, very short word count limit that I was able to work with. I think the only real connection to the world of Tellest is it's got a kind of connection to Animus, who is our god of life. I think we have, let me see, give me 1 second. We don't have it in the art gallery yet. I'm not 100% sure that the character even came out yet. Nope, we have it. So this is the closest thing that I think that I can get you as far as an image that fits this story. So Megget, one of our D&D characters that Dave plays. Dave was one of our players in the Quantum Quest game that we played last week. Megget is... Hello there, Zelda. When did you sneak up here? You got caught, and now you're going to act like there's no possible way you could have been detected. So Dave is one of our D&D characters, or sorry, Megget is one of our D&D characters. Dave is the player. Megget is a character who believes in Animus, the god of life, or it could be Odessa, who is kind of like a follower in some ways, like a minor god follower of Animus. But in either case, bears the shield that bears the mark of Animus. So that's kind of as close as we get to Fallen. Give me 1 second just to see. I want to try and kind of keep things halfway. We'll talk about some things. So let's take a step back into the Tales of Tellest cover one more time. So this is like the framing mechanism that we have for Tales of Tellest, the first volume, not just the individual stories. So when I knew that I wanted to have an anthology, and when I knew that I was going to set everything in the Tellest universe and everything like that, I knew that I wanted some kind of framing device, and I thought a cool way to do that Rhiannon and I were on like an Inuyasha kick. I've always been a huge fan of Sliders. I was becoming a big fan of Doctor Who, things like that. So the idea that I had was kind of an amalgamation of all those things, where a thief who's a little bit more stabby kill than JD was, is looking for a treasure that he could find, that would help him basically win a war against, odds that a traditional war could never be won in. So he ends up stealing this prized artifact. We never actually see what it does, because by the time he retrieves it and gets out of the place that he's in, he's stolen one more thing. He's stolen one of these kind of violet purpley orbs out of the void, which is basically the place where time exists, in its most kind of malleable sense. And the other character that you see here is, sorry, I thought I saw Zelda moving out of the corner of my eye again. The other character that we see here is Nersha. She is the Keeper of the Void, which is the name of the story. We have Keeper of the Void Part 1 and Part 2. One is the opening story, one is the closing story of Tales of Tellest Volume 1. And she's basically telling Rhys that, who she is. She's the guardian of time itself, and she's seen everything that's going to happen, because the void wills it so, and she kind of predicts that Rhys is going to do some stupid stuff, and he does some stupid stuff, and when he's looking into these orbs, those are kind of supposed to be, you can see the cover art that we had along the way for our short stories and our novellas at that point. So you can see, like, we have the cover for Awake here, we've got Mageborn, and back at Tales of Tellest we've got The Fall, we've got Son of the Storm, we've got Stealing Saramore, and I think we've got we had art that Chimera did for us for Remembered in Gold, which we'll talk about in a second, and back here is The Littlest Kobold. And just a real quick shout out, Chimera did an awesome job bringing those to life, but Leo, who did the rest of the covers that you see here, he did a very cool version of that art style, but in his style. So like, he took Chimera's work, colored them in, and brought them to life in a cool way that reflected more of the way that we see all those other stories. Yes, it absolutely is Play Stupid Games, Win Stupid Prizes Multiverse Edition. The screw around and find out of the Tellest universe, if you will. So he ends up basically shattering the Void Orb that he steals, and in doing so, basically pulls himself through time, and needs to basically repair that orb through all the various timeline shenanigans that he ends up finding himself in. So Rhys is the character that I have that can help me get to some of the bigger events of the Tellest universe without having to tell a story within that universe. He's kind of a framing device, but we're using him in more and more interesting ways as we go. He ends up being one of the central characters in the Quantum Quest series, as we saw in last week's presentation when we saw the cover for the Quantum Quest novelization. And he's just going to be, the main character in most of these Tales of Tellest stories until we're done with him, I think. So in every one of these anthologies, we're going to do some pretty cool things. We're getting to the point soon where we're going to be able to see him crossing over with some of the other characters. He is a tool. We're going to see some cool crossovers between him and Bixby. I think there's going to be some Halloween stories that we'll see them in, him and Virgil, because Virgil is definitely going to be a companion that travels with him for a while. One of the other characters who was in the Tales of Tellest stories with Rhys is a character named Vetus, who is an Othradel. It's just a brand new race that I created for Tellest. We haven't had any concept art of them except for the Guardian of the Void character, and I think the Champion of the Void torture chamber that you see from the Quantum Quest games. So we're definitely going to have to see if someone feels willing to take on the task of those kind of things. So Otherdels, they're kind of like, I would have to put it like, I'm going to do a little bit of spoiling here, but at this point it's been like 10 years, so the knowledge to get this kind of information is out there. So Tellest is Earth, Earth is Tellest. They're just separated by 2,000 years or so. The events of the fall ended up separating Tellest from Earth, and then the events of the convergence, which is not part of a book but ended up being explained in The Enemy Within, ended up combining the two worlds again. But there's other worlds out there, so like there's all kinds of weird stuff that happened off-world because of the fall, because of things like the Void and the Nexus and everything. There's other worlds that connect into Tellest in some fun ways, and the Otherdel world, which we haven't seen yet, that is where Vetus is from. So there's a couple of other ones. There's a character from the Quantum Quest novelization who he shows up. He's based on one of the cards, but we didn't actually see him in any stories previous, so he's unique to the story of the Quantum Quest novelization. That doesn't mean that he'll stay that way. We might end up finding another way to use him in the future, but for now, that is where he resides, along with two other interesting champions who might end up being characters that we end up adding as bonus characters in the card game expansions as we go. Reese and Nersha ended up being the first two characters like that. Virgil and Malagath, who is the big bad of the dungeon, they were the next two. There's at least three other characters that we can play with as we move forward, and certainly as we do other stories in the Quantum Quest universe. If we do a sequel to the Quantum Quest novelization, there might be other characters that we kind of add to that mix, and we'll see where that goes. But for now, we already have a decent amount. We're at any day now, we could pretty much say, all right, it's time to launch the Kickstarter for the Quantum Quest reinforcements. I'm just trying to get a little bit more focus on it, a little bit more attention on it before we jump into that, and then we'll start going down that route. Now, we're about to cut to our sponsor real quick, but before we do, I wanted to show off something cool. Last Monday, we got to 25 plus followers, and I said that once we got to 25 plus followers, I was going to start to talk about some of the cool things that are going to happen on this channel. I think Tuesday or Wednesday of last week when we were doing the maps, we did talk about, I'm going to show you two things today, because I can do that. I'm in charge. Let me see how easy it is. It's not there. It's on my Tellest folder. Give me 1 second. Just bear with me. So I think that I showed this on the Tuesday or Wednesday. I know that I was showing it to all, everybody else, but let me see if I have the Quantum Quest modes picture that I can throw up. So once we get to 50 followers, one of the cool things that we'll be able to do is we'll do the Quantum Quest follower entry. I'm like 99% sure that I showed this off, but I know for a fact that I didn't show it during Talking Tellest. So for those people who like to look at this stuff and maybe not look at the maps, this is another place for you to see this. If you watched the Quantum Quest live play and you were thinking, that looks like fun, I'd like to do that, once we get to 50 followers, you can use your channel points on the Tellest Twitch to queue up and become a player in the next game or the next game after that. You'll basically queue, and we'll try and see what we can do. And depending on how many people queue up, we might run more games every month. So you'll be able to use your channel points for that. The next level is our 100 follower level. If you are watching one of our live Quantum Quest games like we've been doing, you'll actually be able to use your channel points to gift a mana to the players in your game that you're watching to give them benefits. So if somebody didn't have enough mana to buy a room, you'd be able to help them get that. It's a fun way to help out the player that you like the most and to stick it to the players you don't. And then finally, the level that we're showing off here before we kind of, as you can see, we kind of fade off into the ether. But the 200 follower level, this is really cool. This is something that's going to be unique to the digital version of the game. And when I say digital, I mean when we're playing these live plays on Photoshop. We're going to introduce enraged chambers, which means that the followers who watch and use their channel points, they can use those channel points to enhance the chambers, making them deadlier. So you can see here our enraged Titan is even more enraged-er. So we've got some pretty cool ideas for that. It'll make the games a little quicker. It'll make the games a little juicier and spicier. So that should be a lot of fun. I'm excited for when we can do that kind of thing, because I feel like not a lot of people can do that, and we're just kind of uniquely positioned to be able to do something cool like that. And like I said, you can see that there's a 300 follower level. You can, wary eyes will be able to see what that says, but we haven't officially announced that yet. Once we get to 50, we'll probably unlock that and then kind of allude to what's happening at the next follower level and things like that. So we've got that. Give me 1 second. I think what we're going to do at this point is we're going to move into today's sponsor spot, and then on the way back in, we'll talk about the other thing that I'm excited to show off once we get to the 50 follower count. So let's look at our sponsor for the day, and I will be right back. An epic fantasy with a slight Nordic flavor, The Chronicles of Atlan, The Butcher of the Eternal Forest by J.A. Bergloff could just become your next favorite saga. Featuring a world steeped in magic and majesty, the author demonstrates a great deal of passion for their story, and a great respect for the genre. That said, things might appear a bit bigger than you might expect. Bergloff's characters are booming and bombastic, and the scope of his work is massive. With a sequel in the works, there's never been a better time to learn more. Check out the promo on the Tellest website today. Alrighty there. So thank you to our sponsor for the day. We're going to be spending a little bit more time looking at that sponsored book tomorrow and Wednesday, because that person ended up supporting the Tellest channel in a lot of cool ways. But what we'll do now is we'll point back over to that thing that I wanted to show off. So one of the things that we get at the 50 follow, once we get to affiliate level, we get to do some pretty cool stuff like emotes and badges. So we worked with Kong Vector team on Fiverr. We've already had these versions of the Tellest babies, so to speak, done up before, and now we have some emotes that are on their way once we get to the 50 follower count and get our opportunity to be Twitch affiliates. So we've got Adelia being all lovey, Jerem and Tato being enraged. We've got Vanathrin, who's cheering for us. We've got Steel Tip, who's just kind of nonplussed. Luca, who's nervous as anything. Dirk, who's kind of excited and curious. And Weepy Alicia. I think that these are absolutely adorable. By the way, Dirk is our animated emote, so that's going to be a fun one that people will be able to play with. And we've got plenty of other things that we can tap into as we go, because as you know, the Tellest Pantheon is huge. So it will be a lot of fun to do that kind of stuff. 24 more followers is right around the corner. I know it feels like we're kind of plateauing every now and then. Once we start to do the things like the channel points and the emote badges and things like that, I do expect that we'll start to see a little bit more momentum. In the meantime, let's keep on chatting. We've got another 6 stories to talk about. Let's go back into our folder over here. We've got Midwinter Requiem, which is next, and this is Rihanna's time to shine. But the problem with that is I invited her to be a guest star here, and she decided that she was way too nervous today, too much of a baby, big old wuss. Basically, I'm just waiting to hear her go, "Hey!" She's not paying attention. She texted. So let's see if we can't find the Midwinter Requiem art here. Did you type it before I said it? It's funny because I'm sure I said it, and then it got to you because of the delay. Very funny that it was predicted as such. Here we go. So this is the beautiful artwork that Leo. Oh, this is only part of it. Give me a second. So this is one of like our most popular posters, I think. He did this awesome artwork for Rihanna's story, and you can see the process that we took to make it so. we have three dwarven brothers who, in this kind of trilogy of stories, there's only two so far, but in this trilogy of stories, these three dwarven brothers are telling stories of their own, and it helps to shape the mythology and the lore of the Cold Whistle clan of dwarves. The Cold Whistle clan we first were introduced to in the Bindings of Fate, but we had a kind of historical view of it because we were seeing it from the perspective of a dwarf who had died, and we were seeing things from like his journal entries and things like that. So this gave us a chance to see more modern dwarves in this place. We saw, if you look, the titling kind of gets rid of it, but if we look in this penultimate version, we can see Frostvale Hall in the back here. These many steps up to the hall. They're shown in the story. They're talked about in both of the stories, Midwinter Requiem and what is it, Shadow Serenade, Rihanna? So we ended up wanting to tell a story that, well, Rihanna wanted to end up telling a story that was kind of supernatural in some fun ways and helped to flesh out the history of that part of the world. So Midwinter Requiem is all about, I don't want to spoil too much. I mean, the story's been out for a while and I could spoil, but I don't want to spoil. The whole concept is it's a story that is about the length that people will go for the people they love, whether that's their community or, you know, a romantic partner or things like that. And it's just, it was presented really cool. Rihanna's always got like these kind of like folk tales, fairy tales kind of way of telling stories. And she just does a really cool thing with all of it. So any chance you get to like read one of Rihanna's stories, do it, because she's always got like very like interesting ways of presenting her stories. She's got a couple of them already. We've got Midwinter Requiem, which is this one that you're seeing now. The sequel to that, Shadow Serenade, came out in Tales of Tellest Volume 2, and I think 2 of her other stories came out in there as well. It's just very cool stuff, and she's got more stuff on the way. We're very excited about it. This latest story that she worked on very hard. That's going to be probably her first novella that she releases. And I mean, I do some of the writing, but she always does the harder job of conceptualizing the story, and I think that that's very admirable of her. Let's see. We've got Practical Warrior next. Practical Warrior is... Let me see how easy it is to grab the dude's name, because I can never remember. I've got so many characters, like I can't remember all of them. Oh, you know what Practical Warrior is? Practical Warrior is an Aaron Canton story that is very brief, very quick, and it was like him experiment. This might have preceded An Unusual Patriot. I'm not 100% sure. It is the only story that I think we have where thus far there hasn't been any artwork from it, and I don't know for sure if any of this story has kind of bled into anything else yet. He's got a couple of Logano and a couple of... Oh, you know what? I just realized the... I'm always finding stuff out. I'm sure that Nace caught it too in the final version. I was looking at another document. We spelled Knowles with a K instead of a G. Anyway, I'm just rambling at this point. Bunch of Knowles, bunch of Logano, bunch of Kaja in that story, and yeah, we have not seen that kind of story leech in anywhere else. I think I was thinking of a story from Tales of Tellest Volume 2. I just want to verify it real quick. Yeah. I was thinking of Lavos in his final night. We have a character from Quantum Quest that showed up in there. Let me head back to the stories. Remembered in Gold is the next one that we'll talk about. So let's head back to the art gallery. We saw this on the... Here, we'll look at this version quick. Chimera did 2 versions of this artwork. She did one that was kind of like in a parchment-y color. So this is our character Kunal and a witchy kind of character named Cascadia. So the idea that we had in Remembered in Gold is I was kind of inspired by the short story The Lottery, which when we usually think of a lottery, we think of great things. And in the lottery, I think the winning character ends up getting stoned to death, and it's not a very fun experience. So we wanted to do something similar like that for Remembered in Gold. And in Remembered in Gold, if somebody wins their drawing, the choosing, so to speak, they're destined, fated for greatness. They're going to leave their town and go off into the world. And this was our first stop in the continent of Lustra. We have a sigil made for this area of the world and everything. It was something that I had a lot of fun writing because it was completely different than what you would typically think. The cover kind of gives it away. We have people who are being turned into gold and things like that. And Kunal makes for an interesting character because he gets to see and experience these things from within his golden tomb, basically. So Remembered in Gold is part of Volume 1 of Tales of Tellest, but we keep telling his story in Volume 2. And one of the interesting things that we get to see is he realizes that all the people that preceded him are in the same boat that he was. So while the people in the lottery knew they were getting stoned and, it was just part of life and it was, okay, this is what's going to happen, the veil gets pulled away from Kunal's head, and he slowly starts to realize that the people who went off on these grand adventures before, they never really did. So it was a very fun story to play with. So one of the things about me that everyone I'm sure knows by now is I am I'm not a procrastinator by any means. I'm just a slow writer, and that is not the pose of somebody who's unhappily stuck in gold. So you can tell even here, the plan is not to keep Kunal in his golden shell forever. We're definitely going to have some fun with these characters in the future. If you see a character in a short story, the plan is as much as possible to try and see how we can add them to the greater Tellest tapestry. So we do have a lot of fun with that. And then again, we'll take a step over to here just so we can show you once this zooms in. I think it's going to zoom in. There we go. So this was Leo's quick take on a small image version of that story. And then we're going to talk about the bubbles. We can actually stay here because these are bubble-esque. So the bubbles is actually a story that predates all these other ones, including Fallen, because when I was in college, I had a creative writing class and I wanted to tell a story, and the bubbles was one of those stories. And I found a cool way, it happens off page, but a cool way to kind of connect that story with the rest of the Tellest universe. And when I was writing the bubbles, it was a story that was kind of it had like a cadence and a melody to it. The prose isn't too flowery or anything to write home about, but when you're reading the bubbles, you kind of see that there is like a pattern to the writing. There's like a way that like things build into a crescendo and then they slowly start to, to slow down and quiet down and everything. So everything starts off soft, gets loud, and then softens up again. Everything starts off slow, gets busy, slows down again. Earlier on in a lot of my writing, there's things that I tried to do where I to this day, I'm still sort of finding my voice here and there and experimenting and things like that. But certainly into Tales of Tellest Volume 1, I was experimenting a lot and just exploring like ways of playing with prose and things like that. And the bubbles is definitely indicative of that. I'm part of a creative writing class. I'm definitely going to try and see how I can be creative with things. So that was a fun story. Again, it preceded everything else, so there's not a lot of opportunity to show off any pictures or anything. But again, there's always been like a part in the back of my mind where it connects into the Tellest universe. So without giving too much away about the bubbles, there's a good chance that we're going to see certain elements or characters or whatever from that again. And let's step over to the Littlest Kobold now. We've got this big cover, but we're going to do the same thing that we did for Midwinter Requiem. Let's see if we can find the Tales of Tellest cover. And in the meantime, we'll also go and look for the cover of The Littlest Kobold. So, The Littlest Kobold is a fun story that I was able to tell. So, my mom had a dog named Harley that we're kind of basing this kobold off of. So, the kobolds in the Tellest universe, for those who might not know, are kind of like our anthropomorphic canines. They're not like the little rats with the candles on their head from WoW or anything like that. When I was researching kobolds and everything way back, they were kind of known to like yip and bark in tunnels in Germany and stuff like that. So I figured it kind of made a lot of sense to go that route with them instead and make them more canine-like. So we have that. And I think, so number one, that's all right, man. So one of the important things that everybody has to know is, in order for a Kickstarter to succeed, you have to have your mom on board, because your mom has to be one of the people who backs at a big amount and makes everything look like it's definitely going to get moving that first day. So my mom, I think, ended up buying like one of my higher like pledge levels and basically got this story written for her. And the fun thing that kind of existed is someone is definitely going to have a poodle kobold. I'm sure I have a mix of a poodle kobold, like some kind of like. So there's a cat. I'm going to go off on a tangent, as I am wont to do. There's a character in the second expansion, or the first expansion, the second game of Quantum Quest, named Vyres, who is, to my mind, a poodle mix kobold. So it does already exist. Anyway, pulling the tangent back. So in the original writing for The Bindings of Fate, which is the book that shall not be named, there were a group of people called Divine Intervention. Way back when, I was grabbing from any kind of resource that I could to help with like the inspiration for the books and everything like that. And Divine Intervention was actually the name of my family's guild in Ultima Online. So this story is kind of like I don't want to say a send-off or anything, because we do see some of the characters again, but this was, we'll say, kind of like an unofficial door opening for them in the new Tellest universe, like the new timeline and everything. So we get to see those characters when they're young. So it was a fun little experience being able to kind of play with characters who are based on, people in my life, but in a different way. Different shades of the same characters, if you will. And the story is all about basically a maligned circus named the Cirque de Malorum that Rihanna helped me create. And it's kind of been a prevalent traveling troupe ever since. And we've seen it come up in a couple of different places. And it just recently had the ability to have one of our characters brought back for I can't remember if it was April Fool's or not. I think it was an April Fool's story that Aaron Canton wrote for us, that brought us one of the cutest characters, or like races of characters that we've seen yet, the Ligomorphs. But anyway, I digress. So The Littlest Kobold was all about this poor little kobold, Leah, being mistreated by the Cirque de Malorum, and the efforts that a bunch of good people took to make sure that she could be rescued and live a life of freedom. And then she ended up using that freedom to become a Quantum Quest character that is a sneaky little thief. Probably not as much stabby, kill. Anyway, that brings us to our final story of the Tales of Tellest, Volume 1, which is a story called Touched. Touched is the reason that I begin all my stories with, whatever, a tale by Michael D'Angelo or a tale by Rihanna D'Angelo. Specifically, I do that because, yes, you can call something Becoming a Man by Michael D'Angelo, Blessings and Curses by Michael D'Angelo. Well, it would have been Becoming a Man, a story by Nace Flaw. But I feel like you can't really title something Touched and then say Touched by Michael D'Angelo. It sends all the wrong messages. So from that point on, it became Touched, a tale by Michael D'Angelo. And Touched was a story that I wrote. It's interesting for a couple of reasons. Rihanna, is that the first time that you've become aware of that? Hold on, I'm going to take that as a sip break. That's awesome. I'm glad that I'm still even surprising you all these years later. So Touched was interesting for a few reasons. So I was working it was the first time that I was working for an agency that was looking after people with, like mental health needs and things like that. And it was also the only story thus far that I've ever written completely by phone. So Touched was kind of like a double meaning. It was, back in the day, if they wouldn't say that you were like mentally handicapped or anything, they would call you Touched, and the entire story was written by touch, not by keyboard, not by pen and pencil, anything like that. So it's the first and thus far only story that we've also written about somebody who had those kind of special needs and saw the world in kind of shades of colors that other people might not be able to. And it's a story that I feel like it was important to me because of what I was experiencing at the time, the kind of people who I was interacting with. I wanted to tell a story that was, certainly not offensive or anything like that. I wanted to kind of help people to understand that, there's nothing wrong with that part of society. It's just they see things differently. And I think that I conveyed that with Touched, and was able to do some pretty cool stuff with it. So it's a short story for sure, but it's still a fun story. It was a way for me to kind of show a little bit of warmth in a part of fantasy, I think, where, you think of it like the way that people treated Hodor, and the way that everybody else, who read about Hodor, like fell in love with him. Like he's a very warm character. And it was fun to help characters in the universe feel that same way about a character like that, and learn that there was some decency there. And it's a situation too where I think a lot of times characters are presented one way and they don't get a chance to grow. And that was certainly an opportunity for me to take characters who I introduced in that story and have them be a little bit more dynamic. So Touched was the 12th and final story of Tales of Tellest that were short stories. Again, of course, we talked about the novellas before. They make up the rest of Tales of Tellest Volume 1. So you've got, again, your 5 bigger stories. We've got The Fall. We've got Stealing Saramore, we've got Awake, we've got Mageborn, and we've got Son of the Storm. They ended up, spawning their own sequels for all of those, and a lot of these stories ended up spawning sequels as well. Tales of Tellest Volume 2 does not have the other novellas bundled in because it would have just been too much. We ended up doubling the amount of stories from 12 to 24. I think 24 is the happy place. I think that 24 is probably where we'll stick around, because even at 24 stories, the stories themselves are getting a little bit longer because we're figuring out ways to tell a longer story without it feeling like it drags on. Originally when I was writing these short stories and novellas, it was to try and learn how to say a lot with a little, and I wanted to not ramble on like I do in real life. And now we're finding out ways to keep that lightness while still writing something more substantial. So we'll end the Tales of Tellest Volume 1 talk here, but we'll certainly have a Tales of Tellest Volume 2 talk in the future. There's, again, 24 more stories to talk about there. We're already, I don't want to say knee-deep, but maybe ankle-deep in Tales of Tellest Volume 3. Let me take a real quick peek at that and see what that looks like. We've got a couple of Bixby stories that are on the way. We've got another Kunal story. We've got a couple of Reese stories. We might introduce some young Luca Cregan stuff in there. We've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stories of that 24 that are actually done right now. With the other 14 pretty much already planned. So once we get moving on that, it shouldn't take too long to get things going on there. And And we'll certainly be leaning on some of our partners to make that happen. So we'll be looking at Aaron and Valena. I'd really like to see if we could get Eric Barnum to do a short story for us. We had talked a while back about doing that, and I feel like when you're talking about doing the anthologies, it's always fun to bring in another partner to like introduce somebody new into that world. So whether it's Eric, whether it's somebody else, we'll look around and see what we can do there. And yeah, so this is just one of those fun things that we can do with the Tales of Tellest. And again, like I said, Volume 3 might be where we start to do the crossovers between these short stories. At this point, the characters have spent... We're kind of doing that already, because you figure Tales of Tellest Volume 2 introduced Bixby to the world, and he ended up being a central character to the April's Fool story that we told. So we definitely had a little bit of fun there. As you can tell, my voice is starting to go. I did a lot of talking today and yesterday, and I'm running around and everything like that. So let's well, hey, I might be tapping you for a story, Sean, if you're willing. We'll see what we can pull together. So I'm gonna leave the chat open for another minute or two. We'll just kind of let the microphone buzz, and if anybody has any questions, I'll answer them, and then we'll go into the closing at that point. In the meantime, I'm gonna take another water break because I'm dying. Oh, you know what? We never actually looked. Did I? Yeah, I did. Don't mind me. It's not even hot up here. I don't have anything. I'm going to pass on that tonight, Rihanna. I have a good mouthfeel with the s'mores milk that we drank earlier. Yeah, I don't even have the heat to blame on it anymore. I think it's become very apparent that I'm just sleepy. Yesterday was a busy day. Fine then. All right. Well, the most important question was asked and answered. So I am going to... What, no chocolate milk? Or something else, John? All right. Let's head over to... Ooh, it would help if I hit the right button. Sean, you can keep answering and talking via chat, but I am going to go into the show closing. So, folks, I want to thank you for watching my stream today. On the screen now, you should see all the places that you can find Tellest and That's Entertainment content. To find anything out about the Tellest Fantasy Universe, you can go to Tellest.com, which we've been looking at all day. For the battle maps my brother and I create, you can go to Patreon.com/Tellest. To see my streams live, be sure to check me out on Twitch.tv/ThatTellestGuy. Again, 24 more followers and we get to unlock a lot of cool things. So tell your friends, tell your family. To see all the streams I've ever strummed for maps and talking Tellest, you can check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/@worldoftellest. For our video game related content, you can go to thatentertains.com or the That's Entertainment YouTube, youtube.com/@that'sentertainmentgames. To find all of our awesome merchandise, including high-quality mouse pads, handcrafted magic wands, which you got to buy quick because Rihanna sold 3 this weekend. The word is definitely getting out. Battle maps, posters, and more, head to our shop at tellest.etsy.com. I'm still looking for a nice full house of fluff on TikTok to see our pups. I got to get that into the mix here. Maybe we'll throw some emojis around on the screen too. I got to find a better send-off, but in the meantime, I'll miss you.